Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of four, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host, Jimmy Graham. We're calling this virtual town hall because we asked our community some questions. We asked them to present their questions, to either call in or to send them to us. And we just got a lot of stuff, some of them, quite frankly, I didn't really think about. Obviously, we've got some stuff. First introduce, we're back with James Cook, criminal defense attorney. He has an FFL as Cook's Gun Repair and Customizing in the Springs.
Yeah, Colorado Springs.
In Colorado Springs. And he's a program attorney for U.S. LawShield. Thank you for hanging with us and being with us for another segment.
Thank you.
Right now, we got some stuff going on. Obviously, we're coming out of COVID, and that had its own things that kind of tapped into maybe the prepper thing, maybe just the instability of our society right now and how fragile that is. So those always spike in the gun community. You know that. Then we had the George Floyd thing going on. That's a big one. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of just confusion. And again, that drives people in to buy guns, to do all this stuff. Let's see, what's the third one? It's election year. An election year, there would have been gun sales and all that stuff. What troubles me on this one is that we have so many. I couldn't even guess to how many firearms have new gun owners have bought firearms, and it's not an equal amount of training.
Yeah.
So that always bothers me, probably you as well. Just saying, I've told people if you have a firearm, you're handling it regularly, maybe even carrying it. And I'm not talking about concealed handgun permit. I'm saying properly trained. You're probably the biggest threat your family's going to see. Not COVID, not the boogeyman, not Al Qaeda. Mom or dad messing with a gun, pointing to their daughter's room through the drywall, that kind of thing. So I encourage people to seek out professional training of people that are humble and know what they're talking about to make their family and their home and their community safer. So. Got a lot of stuff going on. So I just want to dive in because we didn't even put a dent in some of these questions.
Let's do it.
But you're doing a great job. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that we're on the same page, that I'm on the right, the right side of this as well. We take a lot of pride in trying to produce not a hobby, but a capability, and not gung-ho. We talked about the Boogaloo Boys kind of approach that creates problems for law enforcement. Again, we want to be a solution. And we want to be responsible, and we want to remind even law enforcement that, hey, this is my job too. This is my community. These are my children, all that stuff. And quite frankly, you guys need support. Maybe that doesn't mean a guy standing out there with a gun. I asked my chief of police, what can I do to help you? He says, well, we're pretty good trained. I go, I'm not talking about guns and me trying to be a cop. I'm saying, what can I do to help you? And he goes, well, quite frankly, I feel like we're doing a good job. I go, I agree. It'd be great if you reminded people that. I will, because that's the right thing to do. So, I think that, as men in our community, kids?
Yeah,
Mary?
I have two.
You got two kids? Okay.
Yeah.
Boys, girls?
Girls.
Two girls.
Yeah,
okay.
two, 3-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Oh, right on. So a little bit younger. I've got 12, 6. I got 12, 10, 6, and 2.
Oh, wow.
So girl, boy, girl. Awesome. I love being a dad. It's just super cool. But, again, that's what really the part that bothers me. Obviously, SEAL team guy kind of, used to be the guy like, oh, let's go in there. Let's just bring it. We'll figure this out. Take it to the streets. Then you have kids and you're like, man, we are shaping their future. And that scares me, gets my attention. So we're very serious about what we do here because we want to see, obviously a good future for them. We don't want everybody, like you said, the Boogaloo Boys, it's going to be a civil war and it's going to be and all this and that. My kids have never seen a tank rolling down the street. They've never seen... if they saw a military a plane on final, it was at an air show, stuff like that. So I've seen that stuff overseas, and I don't want to see it here. So I'm hoping that it doesn't get silly. So right into the questions. Let's see. Tim from Castle Rock says, "What's the legal threshold for making a citizen's arrest?" You mentioned a little bit about this before in an earlier segment. What is a proper procedure for handing off that arrest to LEO? Sub question is, what's the legal threshold for placing a person in restraint? So wrist ties, handcuffs, flex cuffs, whatever. What are the legal considerations and consequences of doing so? And how is that restraint handed off to a law enforcement officer?
Yeah, great question. I will not encourage people to do citizen's arrest. I think it's a much, much smarter position to, I'm going to watch something go down. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to let them come over there and I'm going to let them handle it. Because if you do that, you're not introducing yourself in towards any kind of liability. So looking at the actual citizens arrest statute, that's a CRS 16.3.201. And what it says is that you are allowed to make a citizen's arrest as long as you see somebody committing a crime in your presence. It doesn't specify what type of crime it is. You don't have to know exactly what felony levels or anything like that are. You simply have to be able to say that, yes, I believe that this person was committing a crime, but understand that you as a citizen, you don't have any kind of qualified immunity. I know there's a lot of talk about that with law enforcement, about stripping them of their qualified immunity and those sort of things. But the reason for that is essentially if an officer sees you doing something and they believe that this person has committed a crime and they're wrong about it. They see you breaking into a home and they think that you're burglarizing his house. Turns out it's actually your summer house and your second home or something like that. You lost the keys. The officers have some protection so that they don't get charged with anything for doing something like that. You don't have any of those kind of protections. So if you are wrong about any of those underlying facts, all of a sudden now you could be facing charges for doing that. So what the citizens arrest statute says is that you are allowed to use force when apprehending somebody, but it has to be reasonable and appropriate levels of force. So if you see somebody, we talked about earlier, somebody's blocking the road and, you think, well, great, they're obstructing a public highway and I'm going to commit a citizen's arrest to arrest somebody for obstructing a public highway. Well, understand that is, that's a minor traffic offense. Okay. And if you all of a sudden get out and you point your rifle at somebody and order them to the ground and put them in flex cuffs, is the jury going to think that was a reasonable and appropriate action to be taken there? You're also, again, the citizen's arrest statute does protect you if it is a truly lawful citizen's arrest and you have to use some sort of force against somebody. It gives you some protection just like self-defense does, because under self-defense, if I shoot somebody in self-defense, I've murdered that person, I've assaulted that person, I've menaced that person. There's a whole list of crimes there. So if you think that I'm going to get out of the car and I'm going to slap some flex cuffs on this guy or, zip tie his hands together, duct tape him, something like that, understand you're then committing false imprisonment. You're going to be committing kidnapping, which is a felony. You are going to be assaulting them, third degree assault causing bodily injury, which is as low as just pain. So there's that long list of crimes that you've now committed. And if you don't have the justification for the underlying criminal offense that you're arresting them for, you're not going to have any sort of protection there. You're completely open to being charged. You're very open to being sued. It's a very bad idea. There are certainly times where something like that might be appropriate. If you're at the mall and some guy starts, shooting and you manage to get over there and take his gun away because you don't have a gun to shoot him back and you hold him down there on the ground, you're effecting a citizen's arrest at that point. You're detaining him until law enforcement gets there. And I don't think anybody's going to have any sort of problem with you doing something like that. But where it gets really troublesome is when people start taking the job of the police into their hands. Yeah. If it is not something that you're protecting somebody, you're protecting some property, you're doing something extremely important and time sensitive, you are much, much better off calling law enforcement and letting them handle it. That way you're not exposing yourself to liability.
Sure. No, that's good. I would extend that same question, when somebody says, hey, when can you pull the trigger? They ask me, hey, when can I pull the trigger? And then I pose, we talked about it last segment, what would happen if you didn't? I would die, then pull the trigger. We do the same thing with our unarmed classes. Why'd you hit that guy? Okay, you better ask yourself, what would happen if I didn't? So I give the example, somebody's holding my wife's neck and her head's blue when I walk in the room. We're not going to have a discussion. Mm-hmm. You're going to let go of her right now, and I'm going to strike. How many times? Until the threat stops. The threat to her breathing, the threat to her losing her life. But that's why I struck, is because what would happen if you didn't? She would die. What would happen if you didn't draw your gun? Same thing. What would happen if you didn't flex cuff this guy? So this guy comes in, and these people send me this stuff all the time, so I see this all the time. Guy comes up and just starts stabbing a pastor or a priest, starts punching them out or physically stabbing them, and you happen to get that gun and you maybe strike him or whatever, and he's a big guy, and you do have flex cuffs and something like that. Why? Because I need to search the guy, and if I get let go of his hand or something, he just may continue stabbing everybody. So things like that. Or, like I said, back into the military kind of stuff, you shoot a guy who's injured, and I need to know because it appears something else is on you, and you might have 5 more guns, whatever. So I think there's a time and a place to do that. And what I would tell people is better ask yourself, you're entering that world. Is it worth it? Because you may, you're going to be, like you said, breaking the law. But what would happen if I didn't? Man, he might get away from me, stab me and these other 5 people, or they may continue doing that. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. But I agree. There's people for that. That's what the chief of police told me. He's like, these people, these Boogaloo Boy guys, if they want to, there is a place that you can do that. It's called the police academy, and it's called, we're still hiring. Like if somebody, no, I'm sorry, he wasn't talking about the Boogaloo Boys. He was talking about my guys that were actually wanting to help. And I'm like, yeah, you can help. You can become a police officer because we need guys, but it is my duty and my right and my, whatever, to protect my family and all that. So to protect my family and my, we tell people all the time, you are your family's immediate responder, period. The police are there obviously as a paid service to help us to protect communities and all that, but you're going to be the guy, to defend their life. Absolutely. I'll do whatever I need to, but I don't need to go stepping off into this and arresting a guy for blocking the street.
Well, and especially when you're talking about restraining somebody, like putting him in flex cuffs or, tying him up. I taught a class a couple of years ago down in Pueblo, and there was an individual that I spoke to at that class, and he told me a story. He lived way out in the outskirts of Pueblo County, and the sheriff's department response time is about 30 minutes out there. And in the middle of the night, he hears some sounds in the house. So he and his wife, they go through the house, and they kind of go and search it, and they're clearing the house, and he walks into his kitchen, which is kind of the last room in the house there. Gets to the end of the kitchen, turns around to his wife to tell her, hey, there's nobody here. I don't know what that sound was. And as soon as he turns around, he sees that there is a guy that is standing behind the wall there that he missed when he walked into the room, standing right next to his wife. And this is a large dude, very, very large guy. I'm a pretty big guy myself. This guy had quite a bit of size on me, and he charged the guy. And it was a young Hispanic kid, and he knocked him down to the ground and laid on him. He couldn't move, and he said to his wife, honey, give me that extension cord. So he got the extension cord and he hogtied him in the living room. And he said he was really excited about this because he thought, oh man, I caught a burglar. I hogtied him. This is an awesome thing. And then the kid started yelling at him. And the kid told him, you don't know how badly you screwed up. I got 4 buddies that are outside in your barn outside. They're going through everything there. They're stealing all your tools. And as soon as they realize I'm not in here, they're going to come in here and they're coming for you. And we're going to rape your wife. We're going to make you watch it. Then we're going to kill her. We're going to make you watch us killing her. And then we're going to kill you. And you don't know how badly you just screwed up. And he starts screaming out, hey, Vatos, get in here, man. I'm in here. Get in here. And the guy panicked. He didn't know what to do because he's got this kid there. He's tied up on the floor. He can't really hurt him or anything, but now he's screaming for his buddies, and he thinks his buddies are going to come in there and then they're going to do all these awful things to him and his wife. So he did the only thing that he said he could think of at the time, and he booted him in the chin. He broke the guy's chin, knocked out a few teeth, and that shut him up right there. He couldn't scream out anymore because he couldn't move his jaw. Of course, there's no honor amongst thieves. So as soon as the 4 guys realized their buddy isn't with them, they took off. They got out of there and they left him behind. Sheriff's department shows up 30 minutes later. They arrest him, so shake his hand, tell him, good job, man. You took this guy down. You didn't have to shoot him or anything like that. He thought it was all fine, and then 2 weeks later, he gets the knock on the door from the process server, saying, "Hey, you've been served. They're suing you for $35,000 worth of dental work and the damage to the guy's jaw." And what he told me is, if I could do that all over again, I would have just kicked him out of my house and I would have gone the other way. And I would have never gone through that. It cost him tens of thousands of dollars to hire an attorney to defend him on that. And that's, I think, something that people don't realize when they think about, I'm going to detain somebody, I'm going to tie him up, I'm going to do something like that. Because at that point, it's not like 24. You're not Jack Bauer. You're going to point your gun at the guy, and he's simply going to throw his hands up and tell you all of his evil terrorist plans in a loud whisper for the next 5 minutes here. Fight or flight is going to kick in. That person is either going to decide, okay, I got to get out of here, and how am I going to do it, or I'm going to have to fight my way out of here. And you are now the only thing between that person and freedom. And even if you can, you can get those cuffs on him, you can get those flex cuffs, you can get that guy to kneel down on the ground and put his hands on top of his head. All he is thinking when he hears those sirens coming in the distance is, this guy is the only thing between me and 15 years in Department of Corrections. And what is he going to be willing to do to get through that? So I always tell people that if you have the option to let somebody go rather than, try to hold them at gunpoint, try to tie them up, something like that, let them go. Let the police figure out who this guy was later and handle it, because you're going to put yourself into a bad position. Because if that guy hears you, sees you turn your head for a second because your wife just walked into the room and you want to look back at her, that's his opportunity to try and come after you. And if you shoot that guy while he's kneeling down on the ground because he was jumping up to try to get you, what exactly is our media going to say about you now?
That's funny, that Jack Bauer thing. This is the story of my life. Everybody, because I've been a trainer a long time, whether it be the SEAL times or the agency or these guys, the Able Shepherd program. We have this thing we all do. I think this thing in our mind, it's this picture and I've actually named it. I call it, we think we're going to storm the castle, slay the dragon, save the princess. Never happens that way. It's always just this ugly thing that's like, this is the wrong place and she didn't want to be saved. And there's, I thought there was 5 and there's 10 of them, all that kind of stuff. It's just never this textbook movie Hollywood thing. And then the good guys have been up in jail. That's a horrible. We're going to keep going on this one. Okay. Brad, let's see, Brad, where's Brad at? I know he's up in Lincoln because I know Brad. Brad's calling in, or he texted in. Are there specific circumstances that must be met for legal use of deadly force to prevent arson? For instance, individuals in a crowd preparing for or using Molotov cocktails where there are people or structures nearby.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really depends on what the target is going to be. Okay.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. If somebody is going to throw a Molotov cocktail at me, the individual, obviously that is deadly force. They're using a deadly weapon on me. That's a pretty clear cut. You can use deadly force to stop them from doing that. Colorado does not allow deadly force in defense of premises, except for first-degree arson. And first-degree arson is somebody is going to burn an occupied structure. So somebody's got a firebomb. They're going to throw it at my house. My wife and kids are inside the house. I can use deadly force to stop that. Now, I don't like phrasing that as deadly force in defense of premises, because what am I defending? Am I defending my house? No, I'm defending
people.
I'm defending the people. And I think that makes it pretty common sense there that you are only allowed to use deadly force in defense of people, never property.
The man, what pops into my head is we would do training obviously for the GRS folks, and then there's just a thing about fire. There's a fear of fire. Unfortunately, I've been in some incidents where people have burned. I've been set on fire, and the one that comes to mind was this was a training exercise where if you have armored vehicles, right, and you're supposed to keep them closed, and then if something happens, there's an attack, then another vehicle will come to your aid, but you keep sealed until they get there to a secure perimeter, unless it's fire. So we'd actually have drills, lighting a Molotov cocktail. It's not a real one, whatever, but you see eyes do this. You throw a cup of it was actually iced tea, but it looks like gas. Throw iced tea on a car, and you start lighting a rag, you see these eyes get this big, and then people, then you crack the seal and save your own life because you're about to burn to death, and that's just not good. So that's an excellent question because, man, when people, it's easy to say defund the police and all this kind of stuff, but man, when they're looking at this crowd and you see a Molotov cocktail, man, that ain't funny anymore. Like this is, pepper balls and all this kind of stuff, and you might get hit with a rock or something like that. But fire, we cannot, put them in a place where they're not in a position, anybody, to defend themselves against getting set on fire. And I don't care what you're aiming for. If I'm over here and you're throwing it this way, then I have no idea of knowing that you're not aiming for my, forehead. Let me back up on one because to Tim's question. I'm driving, this is during COVID, and this is on Highway 67. I'm heading to the mountains with my kids, and I noticed that the actual highway keeps going straight, but there's a turnoff going down to the Platte River, and the citizens blocked the road and said nobody can come through here, which is illegal. But at that point, like they have no legal right? I mean, it's a dude in a pickup truck with a sign, so it's basically like stay out of here. But it is the highway going, 67 that cuts down to Woodland Park.
Yeah, it'd be obstruction of a public highway.
Okay, and that's absolutely, because I was like, that's not that's not law enforcement, it's not whatever, a homemade sign and all that kind of stuff. I think there was so much traffic going to the mountain during COVID, they're like, hey, we don't like you coming through here, but it was a highway. Yeah. So that question did pop into my head. Okay, let's see. Does it matter, and this is Brad, I think you already answered this question, back to the arson thing, commercial environment or residential, it doesn't matter because you're defending people.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Paige, I think he's here in Centennial, but Paige writing in saying a bit of a different topic. What do people think of body cams if knowingly going into a dicey situation? I think he's talking about civilians, especially armed, beyond concealed. So kind of documenting your actions as a citizen. Thoughts on that?
Well, from a legal perspective, it's completely fine to do that. Colorado, there are wiretapping statutes, and some states can be used against people if you don't have the permission of somebody else to be taping them. Colorado is not one of those. We're a one-party consent state, which means that if I want to tape a conversation I'm having with you, be it videotape or I've got a hidden microphone or something like that, completely legal in Colorado as long as I give my consent to tape myself or what I'm doing on it. From a practical perspective, though, is it a good idea to be tooling up with a body cam before you go into something? It really depends on how confident you are in your decision-making abilities. I will
So
tell you,
mess up and document it.
I've had clients that have put cameras on their dashboards, and those dash cams can sometimes be absolutely wonderful. And there are tons of cases where I really, really wish that I had a client that had that dash cam so I could see how fast they were actually going and whether or not this person actually initiated. And those are wonderful things. And then I've had those cases where somebody actually had one of those cameras and it did not turn out exactly like I would like. So what I would tell you is if you are very, very confident in your decision making and your ability to recount things later, sure, go ahead for it. That's a good thing. But don't contradict the camera.
Right on. Okay, so Adam is asking, are there any specifics that should be taken into consideration when working with an established church security team? Should the church be doing anything specific to provide protection for the organization as well as the individuals, volunteers on the team?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I work with U.S. LawShield, and we provide protection for individuals that use firearms or other things in deadly, or not necessarily deadly, that they use force in defense of others or defense of themselves. There's a lot of liability concerns that come up with acting as a church security team. Again, just like when we talked about placing somebody under citizen's arrest, you don't have that qualified immunity. The law enforcement does. So again, you have to be very, very confident in your decision making. It's really easy to come up with the super clear cut cases where you've got the guy that walks into the sanctuary with a shotgun and starts shooting people, and hero stands up and smokes him with a 357 cig from the other side of the room. That's a really easy one. All right, nobody's going to second guess something like that. But what if you've got the homeless guy that smells like alcohol that walks into the sanctuary and starts raiding the donuts that are there for the parishioners before everything starts? That gets into a much, much dicier situation. How exactly should you handle that? So what I would tell people is obviously your job is church security, and it's horrible to have to say this, but your job is to protect life. Okay. Really, you are there to be a buttress against the worst case scenario. Okay. Somebody comes in with a gun, they start shooting people, they start stabbing people. You need to be able to prevent something like that happening. Your secondary job is you should be almost a greeter. Yeah. Okay. If there is that, crazy looking homeless guy that walks in there, it's probably better to have the church security member who's maybe got a little bit of training, has a little bit of confidence, may have a firearm or some other, sort of weapon on them to go up and, intercept that person and say, hey, how are you doing, man? What are you doing here this Sunday? You come here often. Why don't we go in the back room here and I'll get you a cup of coffee and let's talk about Jesus for a minute. I think that's a much better thing than having the 75-year-old, female greeter go up and then try to shoo off the homeless guy. So I think that really needs to be the two kind of main focuses, and everything that kind of happens in between. There's somebody that is busting out windows and stealing stereos, or going for purses outside in the parking lot there. That is not an imminent threat to life. And it's not a minor enough threat that, you should just be casually approaching them and try to find out what they're doing there. That's the sort of thing where, again, be a good witness, call the police, make sure you're watching that guy, follow him if he leaves the parking lot. That way you can identify this is where he is. This is the threat for law enforcement to go take care of.
That's so funny to me when you bring that up, because I've done security for a long, long time, church security for not as long, but for a long time. And it's just so funny how many times we've been wrong. And it's okay. And I think people need to understand that it's okay to be wrong. I've walked up because there was somebody sitting in the car. Something didn't look right. So I walked over there and I'm like, man, the person's just staring out towards the mountains. They're just sitting there and they're kind of, and your mind first goes to, are they like building up courage to whatever? And I walk over there and literally just tap on the glass like, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? Yeah, I'm just out here praying for them. But that makes sense to me now. I'm like, okay. I was thinking, I just had to be sure it's okay to be wrong, and to do the same thing if you see it again, But then people are afraid to be wrong, so they don't say anything, and that's just security in general. But it's funny to me when I see the guys that are like, oh, yellow shirt, and they get the thing, and they're like, watch them, I'm gonna make a move, whatever, and they're like what? And you walk over, and I think it comes down to people skills, and you walk over. I say, if there's a problem here with this person, I'd rather be close than far. I don't want to be across the sanctuary. So getting close to them and saying, morning, are you looking for can I help you find something? I haven't seen you around here. I'm looking for the nursery or whatever. I said, maybe that person just hasn't had their coffee yet. You're trying to, look at them, and it's so funny how people think they have these skills to ID, and there's classes on how you can pick. I've seen people be more professionals be wrong more than they're right. And they're the guys teaching the classes and stuff. And like, oh yeah, that guy's obviously, because he's looking and he's doing all this. And I'm like, because you're wearing a badge that says security guard, and maybe he had a bad thing in his teen years with police, so he's just uncomfortable. Yes, he looks uncomfortable. Does he look like he's going to kill us all? He does not to me, he doesn't, especially after I talk to him and then he finds his wife and kids, that kind of thing. So the people skills on there I think are missed a lot. And because I think a lot of times people are just their worst case scenario gets the better of them, and then they're going into Jack Bauer mode. Let's see. Everett from Kiowa says, and this is church related too, is use of firearm to protect life. Use of firearm to protect life while in a state that doesn't permit non-residents the right to conceal or to even have firearm and ammo together in the same unlocked space. California and Oregon, for example.
Yeah. So just because there's a law that says you can't have a firearm does not mean that you forfeit your right to self-defense. And again, this is where we talked about how, self-defense is a defense to certain charges. It's a defense to a use of force. It is not necessarily a defense to, I had a gun worth someplace where I shouldn't have. Now, just because I had a gun someplace I shouldn't have doesn't mean that I have to roll over and let somebody kill me, or so I have to roll over and let somebody kill my family. So if I'm in that situation where, there is an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, I've got legally carrying a gun and I decide that I'm going to use it to stop that, self-defense still applies. And if you're in a state like California or Oregon, consult an attorney there on what exactly their standards are for self-defense. But I'll tell you, in Colorado, it is, I have to believe that me or somebody else is in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury, and a lesser degree of force would be inadequate to stop that threat. So if I'm in that situation, and the example that always gets asked to me is movie theaters. Okay, I'm in I'm in my local Cinemark, and they've got the the little bumper sticker on the front door that says no guns allowed, and I said, yeah, I'm not doing that, and I carried my Glock in there, and some guy decides he's going to reenact the Aurora shooting, and I use my gun to stop him. Am I still committing a crime by having that gun inside there? Yes, I'm trespassing. We can discuss that question later too, but yes, I am trespassing at that point because their conditions of entry was no guns are allowed inside here, and I've said, you know what, I'm going to violate your conditions of entry. They're a private property, and they can tell me that I can't do it, so I'm now trespassing inside there. Do I forfeit my right to self-defense when I'm inside? No, I don't. Okay. So it's two questions. It's, did I act properly in self-defense? And if I'm truly stopping the next mass movie theater shooter, I don't think anybody's going to have a big problem with doing that. Have I committed the crime of third degree, criminal trespass by having that gun inside that movie theater? Yeah, I have.
I appreciate you saying that, because it changes kind of everything. The way you look at that, we're like, yes, you are committing a crime, and I hate to say it's worth it, but it was worth it. Like basically, what if I didn't, that kind of thing. I heard George Brockler, George Brockler. Yeah. I heard him say this once, and it made a lot of sense because we were talking about this exactly. He says, you're going to see me as the DA for this district or whatever on a gun-related thing if if you're a hero or you're stupid with a gun, right? And he's like, obviously, if you're being stupid with a gun, you're waving it around, you're menacing, and all that stuff, it's not going to go well for you. He's like, I don't prosecute heroes. So he's like, that's what the thing was, is like, if you're sitting there having a coffee, whether you chose to or didn't, and this is what I got out of it, and he kind of explained that, was, guy comes up and just starts, shooting kids or shooting people, ordering line, whatever. And then you neutralize that threat from, loss of human life. He's like, I don't prosecute heroes. So I love the make it easy for me. I'm not a lawyer. Make it easy for me to understand. And that did. Just want to back up to Adam's question real quick on the church. Cause then when I looked at it, I don't know that we touched on the exact, should the church be doing something to protect the individuals in the church? What I see there is that the insurance, U.S. LawShield, something like that, is some kind of, should the church be doing something? When I read that question, I say, is there a standard and is there protection? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
I'll say that definitely a program like LawShield would be a good decision there. I don't think you'd be able to find some kind of a umbrella policy that, from Lloyd's of London, whoever it is, that says, oh yeah, if one of your, church security members shoots an intruder or something like that, we're going to indemnify them. So I don't think something like that's even an option, but having something separate from the church, like a program like LawShield, gives the person that acted, because the protection lies on the person there. It's not an umbrella policy for the church. It is, LawShield says we are going to provide an attorney that is going to cover you in the event that you use a firearm in self-defense. and it follows that individual, and the church has some, some division between them. That's always one of my concerns when I'm talking about church security teams, is that there's kind of a fine line between, you don't want to be the church that decides we're going to equip a paramilitary force to protect us on Sunday, because then if you have somebody that overreacts, that decides to go to the gun too quickly, and they wind up shooting somebody, you've opened yourself up to a huge liability. If they can say, you know what, yeah, you bought this guy a gun, you bought this guy ammo, you sent him to all these classes, you turned him into a weapon, and then he went and used it improperly against that person, that's the kind of thing that's going to get you as a church sued. I think that having a little bit of a break between the liability and the person and the church is a very good thing.
Yeah, and that's what we train a lot of churches. A lot of people come here and train with us. We've always said that it's individuals, like they go, well, who should I put them? Because they don't want to do it. They know the guy that shouldn't be on the team. They want us to say it. You know what I mean? So I think it boils down to like, you better not have that person anyway. And I tell them this kind of jokingly, because like I said, we take a light approach, is that guy that if somebody was hurting kids, he'd lose his life stopping that threat. That's your guy. You know that guy who's got all the guns in the world, and he's told you about them and all that kind of stuff. But if there's a threat, he'd be under this table. It's not your guy. Whatever. You know him. You just got to say it, because I can't say it for you. Once you find that guy, we want to train with him, A, for a capability, B, to make sure that he's not doing it wrong. He's not the guy who wants to kill somebody today. That's the guy we want nothing to do with that guy as far as, this. I'm talking about Jesus, yeah, but I don't want to train him how to use that gun, because he's not mature enough to do it. Yeah. So that's a big deal. I appreciate that. So let's see. Al says, what are the potential criminal implications if we consciously make a decision beforehand to volunteer ourselves or protect someone? We kind of talked about this before, is end up using deadly force to protect it. So you're on a church security team. Could that be premeditated? Because you were there in training, can that be used against you?
I don't think so. And the reason it's not is because every self-defense shooting, every self-defense action is going to come down to what was going through your mind at the time that you did it. Was there a threat? Was it a realistic threat? Did this person have the ability to cause that harm to you, and did you react to it? So just because you volunteered for a church security team, I don't think that's going to be a problem, because you have, it's not like being on a church security team is some sort of crazy thing that, like you talked about the Boogaloo Boys, the guys that are, going out to a protest, peaceful or not, and they're armed up with rifles and body armor. That's the sort of thing that people are going to look at that and say, that's not reasonable. That's not something a normal person would do. I think being on a church security team is absolutely a reasonable, expected sort of thing. You're volunteering, you're doing a good thing there, and you're going to be judged on the merits of your decision making at that time.
That's a good question, because I've heard people take that out of context and say like, oh, you carry a firearm, you do this, and you do training and all that stuff. Is that some kind of premeditated, like we're asking for? But to your point, I think that I can pull up enough news articles to show that this isn't paranoid. This is actually like, hey, this is perceptive. You see what's going on around you and say, man, I think it's a good idea to know how to handle yourself. Like we say, people used to be because they had to be, meaning, your grandpa, my grandpa, it'd be like they have a problem, and then your dad would run over and say, Paul needs you. And he'd grab his lever action and go help out. We've just gotten a little more, comfortable, I guess, and haven't really needed that. I'm not a big doomsdayer, but I think it's time to know how to handle yourself again. Yep. And that goes to a podcast that we had called Root Cellar Mentality. You should be able to feed your family. In case of an emergency, they have a fragile system and it bucks for a minute. You should be able to take care of your family, feed them water, shelter, and then defend their lives.
Well, and what I said previously is every criminal case comes down to the jury. It comes down to what story can I tell to this jury to explain your actions, to explain why you did what you did. And as far as training goes, training can be a double-edged sword. And a lot of people think that, okay, well, I've got all this great training. I've gone out and, I spent a weekend with, some YouTube star tactical trainer or something like that. Obviously, that means that I'm, looking to kill somebody. And the answer I'd say to that is no, because what I'm going to explain is you want to have a better skill set. You want to be able to know that, if I have to take that shot, I've made this decision and it's kind of automatic. I can pull that gun out. I can line up those sights. I can pull that trigger, and I don't have to think about it because I've trained so hard. I know exactly what I'm doing here. So I've got more time to think about, is this a good shoot? I've got more time to think about what are my actions going to be, what is this person's actions going to be, and how am I going to react to it. And I think that's a very good thing to be able to say that, you know, I've practiced my skills up to this point that now I can take more time to decide, is this a good shoot or a bad shoot? And if you're somebody that hasn't had a lot of training and goes and shoot, you know, if you're paying me to represent you, what I'm going to say is that obviously this guy isn't some sort of, you know, crazy tactical ninja, because he hasn't had all those kind of classes. You know, he's had his concealed carry permit class. You know, he went to a LawShield class and heard from some awesome attorney that, you know, talked to him for 2 hours. He's got enough to know what he's doing there, but he's not some sort of crazy tactical ninja, if that's what they're trying to portray him as. And honestly, I'm going to take the facts as they're presented to me, and I'm going to tell a story.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, that's huge, because I think training, when people say training and what kind of training, and we do reality-based training, and some people look at that as extreme, we're creating neural pathways and it gets more comfortable. Are you more familiar with this or not? Like some people, like they get in a situation, this is a story that happened, I've shared it here, over Christmas at Lowe's. Guy was running his mouth, and my wife just happened to walk, it was just a bad timing thing. It was a road rage, and she walked between it with a baby, because it didn't start until she was right in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then she just said, "Can you watch your language?" And then he just adjusted fire, not knowing I was with. So I was in a different vehicle, whatever. So she came over and said, "Hey, watch your language." And I told him, "I'm not asking you. Watch your language." We got a little heated because when somebody's yelling at your wife and baby in their face, whatever. But anyways, just deconflicted that, headed back. She did the right thing. The car turns around, comes back. I'm watching hands and just telling you need to drive on, whatever. Feel like I did a pretty good job because I didn't use, harsh language in front of my kids for this time. No, I don't make a habit of that, but when we get so, that mad and it's your family and your children, I knew they were watching, I knew they were scared, but I was emotional. I was mad. And once we got, deconflicted, they did it right. And everybody remembered it differently. My 12-year-old knew exactly what happened, everything. My wife remembers very little. My other daughter protected my son. My son was in the back of her shirt, kind of hiding and looking around. They remember harsh language they're not used to. They remembered Daddy saying something about the police and me telling the guy to drive away and all this other stuff. But they stayed together and they moved, and that's what I needed. I needed them to see that. Even that was training for the next one. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We talked about this. I would need to practice shutting my mouth. You know what I mean? With you, like you said, hey, be careful what you would say. And that's what U.S. LawShield does as well, is like, hey, you know what, call James, like whatever. Because I feel like, but I'm the good guy and I want to help police. So I would probably start volunteering stuff. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be quiet because I'm a bad guy. I would be quiet to protect myself. And I'm not comfortable with that. I would need to practice that. So we're actually considering, and I told the guys, on last week about this, was I would like to incorporate training all the way through. We could say, hey, you got to play it to the end. So not just the incident, which we practice all the time. What if he's got a knife or a gun or this or that, and get my kids out of the building and active shooter in school, all the way to the end. Meaning you better pull out a card, read some stuff, and somebody else is being, because we have police officers in the program, so they could do that part for us, and we practice this part and not talking.
Well, and you touched on a really important point there. Is how do you respond after you've been involved in any sort of situation, especially if you've used deadly force? The natural human inclination is going to be, well, I've done something extreme. I've taken a person's life. I pulled a gun. I pointed at somebody. You want to shout it from the rooftops that I'm absolutely justified in everything that I've done, because you feel that guilt and you want to justify it to people. And that works against you, because just like you said, your wife, your kids, they all have different memories of what happened there, and they all witness the exact same thing. It's, a very well-known fact in the criminal defense world that eyewitnesses are some of the worst people you can possibly have, because they all see different things. You have a car accident outside and somebody's looking down at their cell phone, isn't looking up at the intersection. They just hear two vehicles collide and they look up and see the aftermath. And when the police show up there, they say, officer, I saw the entire thing. This person's at fault. And they never saw a single thing that happened there. So people have different perceptions of what happens. I think car accidents are a great example to use for this. I've been in accidents before, and I remember it very, very differently afterwards, and a couple of days later I remember it differently. And one of the things that I've seen from my clients in the criminal world is that if they all of a sudden start getting out there and start saying exactly what is going through their mind at that time, they're not going to get all the details right. They're not going to remember all the facts. They're not going to get all the things they legally need to get in there. And when we talked about the Make My Day law, there's a 4-part test in there, and if you forget one of those particular points, you're not going to be qualified to make my day. And of course, you're going to come talk to me a week later after, you get into my office, and I'm going to go over everything. We're going to realize, oh, you forgot to talk about point number 3. You believe the person was in there to commit a crime. And then we've got to go make a supplemental statement to the police and go put that back in there. And that doesn't look good because it looks like I coached you. So my job as somebody's attorney, if they have used force and they're coming and seeing me, my job is to make sure that they're giving one good statement that covers absolutely everything they need to and nothing extra, and that we're not having to go back and modify and change things and move it around to make somebody seem like they're going to be better, because you're going to screw it up a second time. And then in the first case, you said the guy was wearing purple pants. All right. And in the second time you think about it, you calm down for a day, you think about it, you say, wait, he wasn't wearing purple pants. What, was I assaulted by the Joker? No, he's wearing blue jeans just like everybody else. And then a couple of days later, you calm down, you really think about it, and you go, you know what, James, I have no idea what kind of pants this guy was wearing. It doesn't matter. All I was looking at was that gun in his hand, and it looks like he had a 155 millimeter howitzer that he was pointing at me, and I don't care what kind of pants he was wearing. And the problem is you've given 3 answers to the same question when the officer asked you what he was wearing. And what police officers are trained is that when people can't keep their story straight, when they can't give consistent answers, is because they're lying. They're covering something up. Maybe it's not that, I murdered this guy, but maybe it's about, well, why did you get into the argument with him? And it opens up questions, it starts convoluting things, and makes things worse. So my job as an attorney is to, calm you down, make sure you don't make a statement right away, and please, don't help me with that. Don't go, spouting off and making statements as soon as you see the police there. But I need to calm you down, make sure we give one good statement that covers everything, so we're not contradicting ourselves. We're not going back and changing things later.
Excellent. Pete, did you have something? Sorry.
Yeah, I had a question about what kind of precautions you should take, or what kind of research you should do if you plan on carrying a gun, say, on a road trip. So, for example, I flew out to Atlanta just recently to drive a car back for a friend of mine. All the states between Georgia and Colorado had reciprocity with Colorado, but that's the extent of my research. Is there anything else that I should be looking at besides that to prepare myself to if I need to use that on my trip?
Yeah, so a couple of things that are going to need to be in consideration there. If you have a concealed carry permit, that's great. Reciprocity is going to be a very good thing, but you need to be concerned about, okay, if I get stopped by an officer along the way there, do I have to identify that I have a gun? Do I have to notify him that I have a concealed carry permit? You need to be concerned about, what kind of condition can I carry the gun in? If you've got a pistol and you've got a concealed carry permit and there's reciprocity with that state, the presumption is probably that, yes, I can have that gun loaded, I can have it on my hip, but that may not necessarily be the case. And especially if you've got something different, if I got a rifle in the car, do I have to have any sort of, special considerations for how I carry that? This is one of those things that's really easy to Google and really easy to get a ton of bad answers on there. Because there are not that many lawyers out there in the world, but if you get there on the internet, everybody thinks that they're a lawyer. I think LawShield is actually a really, really great resource to use for something like this. If you call the non-emergency number on there, it'll route you down to the Houston office. They've got a list of attorneys in every state that you can call and get a hold of in there and say, hey, what exactly are the requirements on this? I get these calls about 5 or 6 times a week, and just give them a really quick 45-second answer. Hey, you're from this state. Here's the requirements. Colorado, no duty to inform. You can have the handgun loaded. You can have it concealed on you. And then, I usually give them a short spiel about whether it's a good idea to tell them you got the gun on you or not, and give them that answer. But I think LawShield is a really great resource to use for something like that.
We actually did. So like everybody in this room, minus you, where were you, brother? No, we did a motorcycle ride last year, and Steve, Steve Klein, great guy, joined us. BMW, he just joined. It was just an amazing thing. It was a fundraiser thing. It was a memorial thing. Awesome memories. But that was one of our concerns. Obviously, this group rolling down the road, you can pretty much assume, what's going on. So he, I believe, went and called attorneys from every state that we went through, and this went all the way through the American Northwest, and then back and said, hey guys, on this day, lockboxes, this, that, and we kind of gave everybody kind of that brief. But I believe he just went through and just checked the boxes in the states to find out through U.S. LawShield. So that was a pretty cool thing. As I understand it, you can add other. Do they call them riders? Do they call them protection? Like if I'm going to hunt in season, or if I'm going to go on a trip, you can actually get coverage through multi-state. Or am I saying that right?
Yeah. They've got a number of size of the base program, the number of add-ons. Multi-state. The Hunter Shield one, I'm actually the attorney for Hunter Shield, and
you are?
Yeah. I'm that guy. I'm a longtime hunter, and they just kind of said, cool. Hey, you know about all this kind of stuff, right? And got voluntold to do it. I like that though. But yeah, the Hunter Shield is a pretty cool little add-on they've got there. A lot of people don't realize how easy it is to screw up something as far as the game regulations go. I had a client that 2 years ago, he was out deer hunting way out on the eastern plains, almost by Kansas, and he was out in a cornfield that had grown up there, and they had a low barbed wire fence that was dividing the property that he was hunting on from the guy next to that guy's property. And he saw a deer, got a little bit excited, shot it. He said, I didn't see the barbed wire fence in between there. It turns out the deer dropped 15 feet on the other side of the fence. All right. The homeowner that owned that other piece of property didn't want him hunting on his property, got upset, called up DOW. All of a sudden, he's facing charges for illegal taking of wildlife, illegal possession of wildlife, shooting across a public road because they weren't sure where he fired the shot from. It turned into a huge, expensive mess for him. What I tell people is if you've got something like Hunter Shield there, that's a very, very good thing, because if you're anything like me, I live in Colorado Springs. I don't go deer hunting in El Paso County. I go to someplace out east, or I go someplace way south there. And if you have to go to court down in one of those counties, guess what? I'm driving 6 hours each way to do something like that. That's a pretty big pain there. But if you've got something like Hunter Shield, they are paying me to drive 6 hours down there for you. And I'd much rather that I get paid to do something like that than you have to pay to do it yourself.
On that, I want to close with this, because this is, we talked about this a little bit before. Thank you very much for bringing this to us and talking to us about this and making it understandable, because a lot of this stuff, when you try to read through it, man, it's pretty painful, So with the examples and with the questions and all that stuff, I know it's really helped me wrap my head around this. But truly, I want to know exactly, because if we're playing this out middle of the night, thinking about my kids involved, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to be emotional too. What do I say exactly? And I know lawyers are like, well, yeah. So like right now, the police come over, like, hey, what happened? I'm just right here. I did all this stuff. I holstered. I did this. I'm hugging my kids and kissing them, doing all this stuff. And then he walks over. And he's like, hey, were you involved in this? What happened?
Yeah. So, first thing that I tell people is, because I've heard some weird answers on this one there. If you have used that gun in self-defense, first thing you need to do is call law enforcement. Okay. You got to get help rolling there. Okay. When you're on the phone with law enforcement, they're always going to ask you basically some variation of the same questions. It's going to be, what's the location of your emergency? And then what's the nature of your emergency? And the first one, obviously, tell them exactly where you are, tell them your phone number, all that kind of stuff. The second one is the one you need to be a little bit cautious about, because what's the nature of your emergency? Well, 911 gets to interrogate you for free without having to give you any sort of Miranda warnings, and everything you say on a 911 call is going to be taped. So I tell people, keep it as short and sweet as possible. Somebody was shot. We need police. We need paramedics. Please hurry. Okay. And the question always comes up, well, do you say I shot somebody or somebody's been shot? Yeah. And honestly, it doesn't make any difference. Okay. Because if this is a self-defense shooting, eventually I'm going to be admitting that I'm the person that pulled the trigger. Yeah. I'm the guy that shot this guy. Where it makes a difference is the follow-up question. Because if if I'm a 911 operator and you're on the phone with me and you say, I shot somebody, what's my follow-up question going to be? Why? I don't want you answering that question. If you say somebody's been shot, what's the natural follow-up question? Who? And if you say, some crazy druggie, I don't know what he was doing in here. All right, you haven't really hurt your case too much, but I don't want you going into the explanation there. Ultimately, if you say I shot somebody and then you stop right there, great. You haven't hurt your case. You haven't modified it in any way, shape, or form, because we're going to be admitting to that anyway. But I just don't want you going too far in depth with people. We've heard the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, 911 call that, the media is deceptively editing it. That kind of stuff happens. You don't want to hang yourself on a 911 call. What I do tell people, though, the exception to something like that, because if you've already fired the shot, you already pulled that trigger, get off the phone as quickly as possible. If you haven't fired the shot, you haven't pulled the trigger there, I think having an audio recording of everything that's going on is great. If there's the audio recording that, hears me yelling, hey, get out of the house. No, stop coming towards me. And then you hear the bangs on it. That's awesome. That's one of those pieces of evidence that you play. Nobody's going to second guess you. Now, obviously, don't be doing anything untoward if you're taping it and know you're doing that. But first thing, call 911, get the help arriving there. And then when the police show up, don't have the gun in your hand. Okay. We talked about this earlier too. Holstering is the best way that I think you can. If you've got a rifle, I have slings on all my rifles and shotguns. So you can throw that thing across your back and
don't have it in your hands.
Yeah. Keep the hands up. Just keep the hands up, but you don't want it falling into somebody else's control. And the police are going to get there. They're going to start, asking all sorts of questions. If it's info that's on your driver's license, that's okay to give them. Better yet, hand them your driver's license. Okay. But if you don't have that, you can give them that sort of information, but make it clear to them that I'm not going to make any statement until I've had an opportunity to speak to my attorney. There's no magic words that you have to say. I've seen, some programs have like a 3-paragraph essay on the back of their card that says you have to read this off to police, talking about, I'm going to identify all possible suspects and point out all possible evidence and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, you're not. Because I'm going to tell you, you're not doing anything like that right now. You're going to calm down. You're going to have a very bad experience for, the next little bit as this adrenaline is wearing off and your mind is racing and stuff. But I don't want you making statements right now. All right. My job is to talk to you, figure out when you're safe to make that statement, when you've calmed down, you've had enough time to think about this, to rationalize what happened and go through in good detail of what happened there. So I don't want you making statements to the police. I've again heard so many times that, well, you got to tell them that, I was afraid for my life and that I was defending myself. Well, the problem is once your mouth starts moving, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? And it's going to keep moving because you're going to want to scream that from the mountaintops that you were justified. Don't do it. Okay. All that information about I was afraid for my life, I was defending myself, we're going to get that out eventually. Okay. I'd much rather have you spend a little time calming down, thinking about what happened so we can give a good rational statement than trying to piece together 6 different statements you gave to 5 different officers, some of which are contradictory, some of which don't cover everything they need to. And then I've got to go back in later and, try to restitch this into that story.
Yeah. So as far as having something like this, I don't know. One thing I'm not going to want to do is reach for my wallet. You know what I mean? As they're coming up and I'm reaching back behind me where a gun could be and be grabbing this out. I grabbed this off this is the card they give you. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to even be able to see or read in the middle of the night. And then I did grab that from the brochures. I do not consent to any searches. I'm invoking my right to remain silent and my right to an attorney. Yes, no, or just
that's great.
Don't say anything. Like, is there a shorter version of memorize that and just say it and then stop talking? Can I hand them the card if I have it out?
You can absolutely hand them the card. The shorter version of this is I want a lawyer and then shut up.
Okay, I like that. I like that. So, there we go. All right, that's the one I'm using. It's like, hey, I want a lawyer. And shut up and turn into the mute guy, whatever. So, no, that's huge because I think that realistically, like I said, you said it, I said it, I want to help, man, but if I want to help you, there's facts here that are unknown, but I could be hurting myself and hurt my family. So I'll just be honest with you. I got on a phone call with, I didn't put a lot of people ask me, do you have these? Like, I don't have this service. I don't use, any of this stuff, because very unlikely that I'm going to shoot somebody. Over the past year, 6 months really, I'm telling people, I don't sell this stuff, whatever. But when people ask, I tell them, yeah, you might want to have that with you right now. Don't know why people are losing their mind. Don't really care. I mean, I care, but once it's in action, I don't really care why you're in this school shooting kids. I don't care why you're in my house, that kind of thing. I'm just going to have to, do what I have to do. But I think it's like $12 a month. And I'll be completely honest with my, we talked to both. We did some due diligence. I don't know if you know Dudley Brown, Rocky Mountain gun owner.
Oh, yeah.
Got on with him. As a favor, he pulled on a couple people and said, hey, if you want to air this out, let's do it. I'd like to do that with you. So we started talking, asking all these questions. And I still wasn't sold until one of Dudley's guys asked, he goes, let's talk about the cost. I shoot somebody, what are we talking? That was all of a sudden break the bank, break my new business, break the family, do all that kind of stuff. It's worth the $12. And again, I'll be honest. I talk to competitors. I get comped because of who I am and what I do. Mm-hmm. They offered me even more. This was a better fit for my people. I'm not looking for the best fit for Jimmy Graham or this facility. I'm looking what's best for these guys, the guys in my program, and this was it. So it does make me feel a little better when I see all this craziness that I've got this in my pocket, and then I can call a guy like yourself to keep me on the street. We tell people we want the good guys out on the street protecting one another. Period. I don't want them in jail.
Well, and look, I'm not a salesman for LawShield. Yeah. Okay, I'm an attorney. I know. I'm an attorney. I do some work for them. I do some classes, that kind of stuff. I'll tell you the thing that I like the most about it, and it is a good program. I'm a member myself. Is not that they pay for all the expenses if I go to trial, if I wind up using a gun in self-defense, because if I, as the attorney representing you, do my job right, you're not going to. You know, I believe that you're a competent guy, that you're going to make some good decisions here, and that ultimately, you know, as long as you got your head on straight, you're only going to be using that force when it is absolutely necessary. All right, and I think most people are going to be in that sort of situation too. The best thing that I think the LawShield does is, if you wind up going down to the jail and you say, hey, I'm not making any statement until I talk to my attorney. All right, they're going to say, great, there's a phone book over there. Go find an attorney, call them, and we'll come back when you got your attorney there. And the first thing that happens when the new phone book goes out in the jail is that all the inmates steal the pages that have attorneys on them. All right, you're not going to be able to get through to somebody. You've got my personal cell phone number now. All right, if you call me at 3:30 in the morning, my phone does not ring at 3:30 in the morning. It doesn't ring until 8:30 in the morning when the do not disturb comes off, except for the LawShield emergency number. All right. And when that one calls through, I answer that 24/7 because that's my job. All right. I've told people, you know, plenty of times that you can know an attorney. I know pretty much every criminal defense attorney down in Colorado Springs there. And if you try to call any of us at 3:30 in the morning on a Saturday, you're not going to get through. The best thing that LawShield does is, because you've got that hotline that, you know, everybody who's a program attorney, there's about a dozen of us in the state. You know, the way that works is you call that one number at 1 in the morning there, it rings through to all of our phones until one of us gets through. You're going to get through to somebody, and that person is going to be a qualified Colorado attorney. And that's absolutely invaluable. You don't get that with something else where, you know, they simply say, hey, here's a list of 8 people that we like here in the state. Pick one of them that you like, and we'll reimburse you after the fact. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm a believer. I appreciate it. I hope I never have to use it, but I feel better having it in my pocket. And I appreciate you putting this on a level. Like I said, I want the down and dirty, easy to understand. I think most of our people do. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Keep it up. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for being here once again. James Cook, criminal defense attorney. He's got his FFL and that's a big deal too, that you live this, you kind of do this. You're not just an attorney, but you're also in the business as well. So you see all the people coming through, needing the training and looking, uncomfortable, you know, like right now and all the stuff going on, we're saying, you're seeing all the people walking in the door and all that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit, you know, get your attention, at Cook's Gun Repair and Customizing, Colorado Springs, and program attorney for U.S. LawShield. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, guys. That's it for this week. We'll catch you next week. Please give us a 5-star rating on this podcast. Watch the video, as Perry Saul says. He loves it when I say his name, by the way. He listens to him, then he watches the video, and it's even better. So I'm going to believe Perry on that one. So you do the same. On Facebook, check us out on Able Shepherd and keep track of what we're doing. We got a lot of cool stuff coming this summer. I'm going to make it a mission to get some training where we do all of this. We go all the way through and even practice not talking, because I know I'll be the one that's going to be the hardest one, even to law enforcement, because I'm going to want to help them out. Let's see, ableshepherd.com to learn about the program, ableshepherd.com. I spell that every time because there's 50 different spellings for that. So we want to make sure you get it right. And until next time, God bless each and every one of you. Take care of one another.